Greetings, comrades, and welcome to another installment of MMT Mondays. I'm Commie John with Real Progressives, and tonight's video is one of my personal favorites. It's a great teaching resource. It's one I've used several times as like a starting point for people who are curious about MMT, but likely aren't going to sit through a 2-hour Randy Ray lecture, which I also recommend doing. But this video is just a well done, condensed, easy to digest MMT lesson with some great animations. And the reason it's so effective, I believe, is it really hammers home a couple of the core principles of MMT that, at least for me, I needed to really grasp these before the rest of it started to fall in place and make sense. We get stuck on that idea that we have to come up with money to pay for things. And propaganda is a hell of a drug. And we need to get past that. We need to unlearn a lot of these bad habits and misconceptions about economics that we've been taught our whole lives. And this video is a great place to start. And I can think of no better time than in the middle of a pandemic with, just massive economic ruin on the horizon for a lot of people. I mean, we better get with the program and learn this and start demanding that our representatives in government, learn it too. I mean, I believe they all know it and are just going along with the game, but they are the center of the currency. Currency is born and dies with the U.S. government. We need to get on board because we do have the money. We can fix this. We can get out of this crisis without all the pain and suffering that looks to be as the government sits back and does nothing. Watch the video. We'll come back and discuss for a minute.
Excellent schools, support for our veterans, medical research, upgraded infrastructure. Imagine if we could afford all these things. Well, we actually can. But somewhere along the way, we forgot the true power of our currency. We invented the US dollar so we could unleash the full potential of our nation, of our people, of our land, and of our economy, to achieve our greatest aspirations. You see, the United States is a currency issuer. Currency issuers are completely different than currency users. This distinction is a really big deal. Cities, businesses, and households like yours and mine are all currency users. Our federal government is not. Currency issuers are unique. They should not behave like currency users. If you can grasp that, you're already further along than most of our politicians. Currency is our government's money. Only the US government can create our nation's currency. Many countries work this way, but not those like Greece, which gave up their national currency. Not all money is created by the government. Banks, credit card companies, and other institutions also create money each time they issue credit or loan. We call bank money credit to distinguish it from currency. Most of the money in our economy is bank credit, but credit is not the same as currency. Currency plays a unique and important role in our economy. As a nation, we dream big about how to make life better for our citizens and communities. Unlike you and I, who have to earn or borrow money to spend it, we gave our government the exclusive power to issue the national currency. Every time our government spends, it creates currency, usually just by adding numbers to bank accounts on a computer. And when it taxes, it removes some of its currency by subtracting those numbers. It's a bit like keeping score. Adding and subtracting currency to various accounts is like adding and deleting points in a computer game. So our government can't run out of its currency any more than a computer can run out of numbers to add. And it never needs to get points before it can add more. Now you may be wondering, if the government can just issue currency with a computer, why would anyone accept it as payment for anything? Why would it have any value at all? Well, this is where we discover why we have taxes. Federal taxes can only be paid with the government's currency. In order to pay our taxes and stay in Uncle Sam's good graces, we have to first get its currency. By requiring that we return that currency to pay our taxes, the government creates continual demand for the currency it alone issues. Now, because some people, including many of our politicians, don't understand the difference between currency issuers and currency users, They think Uncle Sam needs our tax money to pay for spending. But it's actually the other way around. The government spending gives us the currency we need to pay our taxes. So those taxes simply remove from the economy some of the currency which was already issued by the federal government. This helps our economy stay in a healthy balance. One of the biggest responsibilities of the currency issuer is to make sure it isn't causing unemployment or inflation by taxing or spending too much or too little. The really powerful part about all this is that not only can currency issuers like the US never go broke, but they can also always afford whatever they're authorized to do. But if the government doesn't need money from external sources to fund that spending, what's with all this fear about the national debt? Don't we owe China $1 kajillion or something? Aren't we worried they'll stop buying our government bonds? Well, not really. Think about it. How can we borrow US dollars from China when all US dollars are made in the USA? You see, China gets their US currency through trade. They send us stuff, and we pay them with currency, which they, along with many other countries, like to save. We like to save currency too. US government bonds are actually just big savings accounts, a really safe way to hold currency that's already been spent into existence. So that big, scary-sounding number that's commonly called the national debt is actually just a record of all the savings of US dollars since our country began. All the currency that's been spent into the economy and not yet taxed back. That's nothing to fear. You probably noticed that our government is almost always adding more currency into our economy than it takes out in taxes. We call this a government deficit, but it's actually a completely normal and necessary response to people saving its currency. You see, our capitalist economy is dependent on sales growth. Money that's being stashed away or spent overseas isn't being spent on the goods we produce here at home. When US sales fall, our employers have less income, and they're eventually forced to cut production and jobs. As the sole issuer of our currency, the government plays a vital role in helping our economy keep growing. We decide what we want our government paying for, and that sets the amount of currency it creates via spending. The government should then adjust the amount it removes via taxation to just enough so our economy stays at full employment and avoids inflation. In other words, Congress is supposed to manage the currency to balance the economy. Freeing our government from senseless limitations like debt ceilings and balancing the budget enables it to use its sovereign currency powers to accomplish the real and serious tasks for which it was formed in the first place. Tasks like putting available resources to work on our infrastructure, investing in the health and education of our people, ensuring our safety and well-being, ending unemployment and keeping our economy growing, taking care of our retired, our sick, our hungry, our poor, our huddled masses. Sound familiar? As we rediscover the power of our sovereign currency, let's hold our government accountable to use it wisely, for our nation's prosperity and for the well-being of all its citizens.
Yeah, it's really that simple. Economics can get pretty complex the deeper down the rabbit hole you go, but just the understanding the reality that our government is the currency issuer, the sole and monopoly currency issuer of the US dollar. That's the easy stuff. It's just, sure, the government creates the money out of thin air. That's where money begins. And by that logic, the government doesn't need to borrow money from anybody. And the government really can't willfully be in debt. And at the same time, they don't need our tax dollars back in order to spend. Taxes serve an important purpose, or several important purposes, but funding spending is not one of them. And again, that's one of the disconnects is, well, how are we going to pay for it? We don't have enough tax revenue. And if you really do the math, over the last couple decades and the amount of, the trillions that we've spent on war and military every year, and at the same time giving massive tax breaks to the wealthiest people and corporations, eventually the math, you got to realize the math doesn't add up. And of course it doesn't add up. There's no way we tax enough to cover all the spending, because there'd be no money in the economy then. That's the general idea, that it's not the government is not a currency user dependent on tax dollars to spend. It's just that simple. And I think once we wrap our heads around those basic ideas, it kind of lets us build this foundation to where we learn the next steps. And I urge you to keep doing it. I just got to a point to where I got tired of the government starting wars and giving tax breaks to the richest people that don't need them, and then telling me that they couldn't find a way to help me send my kid to college, paying for it, or help me pay for my exorbitant health insurance and deductible and copay costs. And then they're pulling their pockets out saying we're broke as I watch them finance a new fleet of, F-35 jets at $300 billion a piece or whatever. So I started digging and I started looking into stuff. And, Real Progressives has been a leader in the MMT awakening movement, so to speak. So I would urge you, keep watching. Go to their YouTube pages, subscribe, check out some videos. Question everything and keep questioning. But always keep an open mind, because perception isn't always reality. And we've been led to believe a lot of things that aren't so. And it's time we wake up. And that's about it. Thanks for joining us tonight, and always stay vigilant, comrades. Signing off from Rebel Headquarters, I am Commie John with Real Progressives.